The terror attack at the airport in Istanbul is trending today. A coordinated terror attack left 41 dead and more than 230 injured. And as it is, the holy month of Ramadan is coming to a close next week. We hope we just don't see any more attacks like this one, especially on our own soil. Here to discuss the terror in Turkey is legal analyst from ClarionProject.org, Jennifer Breedon. Jennifer, welcome back to America Trends.
Thanks for having me on, Dr. Gina.
Now, Jennifer, do we know that it was ISIS who carried out this attack?
We do believe such. The Prime Minister of Turkey, Erdogan, as well as senior police officials in Turkey have now confirmed that they do believe this was ISIS above anybody else.
All right. So why do you think it was Turkey and the airport there in Istanbul? And why do you think that was an important target for them?
Well, it's a very important target. I mean, I think one thing they were trying to do, this is an organization that's trying to show its power. That's its ideology. They just got run out of Fallujah, and that was a major base in Iraq. And so now they're trying to show the world that they still have some power. It was also a really dumb move on their part because Turkey has actually been notably silent from the international coalition fighting ISIS outside of their borders. And so for them to do this was really not very smart. But it's strategic that they were trying to go after the third busiest airport in Europe to show that they still have a lot of power.
But it doesn't seem that smart, really, when you think about that, Turkey hasn't been one of those who's been really up in their face about anything. I mean, they've done some things to try to prevent some terror, but there's terror, but there are some good relationships. There's Turkey's sort of a Switzerland, isn't it, on some of these issues?
It has kind of been. Turkey's definitely been like that. They've kind of been really focused on their own national security within their borders. They've got the spillover from the Syrian war on their southern border. They've got the PKK, which is the Kurdistan militant wing that does attacks within their border. They foiled a couple ISIS plots, but they've been notably absent from anything outside of their borders. And so it's a really dumb move. We're talking about the second largest military contingency in NATO. And so for them to do this attack against Turkey is really, really dumb, because it's almost like inviting a very powerful enemy to finally go beyond their borders and bring their entire military force down against you.
Why do you think it took so long this time to take credit? It seems like usually they take credit like almost immediately. It seems like it took a lot longer this time. Why?
Well, and that's the thing. You're probably not going to hear a lot of very publicized credit taking from ISIS because a couple of reasons, one of which we were just talking about, which is that they don't want the full force of the Turkish military. They want to be able to tell their insiders and their fighters, privately, look, we did this in Turkey. We're very powerful. Please join us. But they don't want to publicize this such that Turkey would immediately send their entire army in. So they really don't want to. Another reason is they've used Turkey to bring fighters from Europe into Syria. That Turkey's been a main kind of a pathway to go in there. And if they start really doubling down on security, especially from refugees, Turkey now has millions of refugees and immigrants coming in. If they really start cracking down on this, then it's really going to hurt ISIS fighters coming in from Europe.
So what's your prediction? Did it seem, do you think that first of all, how is the Turkish government reacting thus far? And how do you think they'll react? Do you think they will tighten up their borders or take any more measures? It certainly seems like when something happens here on U.S. soil, the government doesn't miss a beat before they start politicizing the event, whether or not it's actually going to contribute to further safety. They always make changes immediately, and some might say reactionarily or emotionally.
Absolutely. And you're totally right, Dr. Gina. That's one thing that, is troublesome with the U.S. We tend to politicize it immediately, whereas you've seen other countries when the 21 Christians were beheaded in Libya in early 2015, the Egyptian President al-Sisi acted right away, but he went and did targeted airstrikes against them in Libya. And so what we're hoping to see is a reaction more like that with Prime Minister Erdogan to really call, as he is right now, calling on a global force to really go against it. It's a very different thing from this sort of rhetoric that we've heard from the president, this current administration, talking about this global coalition that will, maybe go in and does airstrikes here and there. But what took out ISIS in Fallujah was the Iraqi army ground offensive. That's what took out ISIS ISIS in Fallujah. And so that's what we need to be doing, is realize these are NATO powers that are being attacked. An attack on one is an attack on all under the NATO charter. And we need to really have a ground offensive. And I think Prime Minister Erdogan really wants to show his power in the region. He's trying to fix his relationship with Russia. They've now tried to mend ties with Israel after so many years. And so this is a huge step in Turkey trying to show themselves as a power in the world. And I think he's really going to step up his attacks and really continue to call on a global force and a ground offensive that's much greater than anything we've seen.
We're not really hearing those sorts of comments, though, out of this administration. We heard some great points from candidates. Donald Trump made some great points, things he would do on the issue of terror. But we're not really hearing the U.S. government come up with a new plan. They're saying we need to stay the course. Initially, I think that President Obama called them the Junior Varsity League. I think he's moved on from that and made a statement either today or yesterday saying maybe we're not dealing with the Junior Varsity League anymore. It's a nice time for him to wake up and notice that how many lives had to be lost in the meantime. But do you think that without the leadership in place in the United States, that any real dent can be made in terror?
It cannot. And the thing is that ISIS knows that. They know that. Their leaders are watching that. Their followers are watching that. And when there's a weak United States, the rest of the world sees weakness and they see instability. And so they need that. Despite what other people may say, that we're not sure if we want the U.S., they do want the U.S. You need a strong United States because that is what we're used to. And when you don't have that, ISIS will continue to grow. But we're talking about an administration now whose only goal is to protect their legacy. And so anything that starts to come down, any significant moves or changes on the part of this administration, according to the president, is going to show that there's been a failure in this administration. They don't want to show that. They want to go out with a legacy. And so it's just like you said, we absolutely need to be stronger in this. We need to speak out on this. But I don't think you're going to see a lot of change from this administration in battling ISIS. You're going to see the same status quo. And as you've seen, it's continuing to get worse, and it will continue to get worse.
Yeah, I've lost count of the terrorist attacks abroad. Sometimes, sadly, if there isn't a whole huge loss of life, or if lives from America weren't threatened, we sometimes don't even hear a lot about it. But there have been 2 attacks in the past 6 months on American soil, and yet really nothing from this president. And so with a week left of Ramadan, what's your prediction?
Well, unfortunately, it's likely that there are going to be attacks, whether they're foiled and we don't hear about them, which is what we all pray and hope for, or whether they are actually carried out. That's what's happened. There have been foiled attacks in Turkey before this one, and so that's something that
all right. I'm so sorry.
Really
we have to leave
careful.
it there, Jennifer. I just ran out of time and didn't even notice.
Sure.